Felix here, welcome to our live chat here. We're going to do a Q&A on NIO, well, possibly also other things if that's what you want to talk about. We're going to run through a little bit the week's news, where we're at, what is going to happen to the NIO stock. Quite an exciting week, I think, in terms of news density on NIO. We've had all sorts. We had the industrial park announced yesterday. We can go into that. NIO has bought back shares from the government. They own 90% again of NIO China. We have that sort of tentative announcement of a US launch where they're hiring somebody in China basically to figure out the business plan. But much more excitingly, really, in Europe, we're seeing substantial hirings. We saw they hired somebody from Tesla to run the European operations in Denmark, and are rolling out basically into Norway. We saw things like, NIO House coming up there, battery swapping, BaaS, all that stuff going on in Norway as a sort of first launch pad for the European markets. That's pretty interesting, I think. We were told by Morgan Stanley this week they thought NIO could be profitable and would be profitable in 2021, by a slither. But that's, I think, a really, really interesting story. If they could pull that off by the end of the year, I think that would give the stock a lot more kind of comfort. People would then just say, well, this isn't just a sort of hyped stock that isn't making any money, but actually this is a stock that is making money, and we can see the margins. We've seen margins, gross margins go positive, but net margins obviously still are negative. So that will be, I think, quite an interesting one. So welcome everyone on the chat here, guys. Mobamba, Shaksa, Matus, Nida, Ali M, and Tiger Lily. You guys hit like to where you saw today. I put out a first video. We've made our first donation for every single like, guys. Always donate 1 cent to Animal Sanctuaries at Gentleman. We made our first donation today. We've only been doing this for 1 week, and we are already donated just under $85. So over the course of February, that number is obviously going to shoot up a great deal, particularly as our community is growing so much. So guys, please do hit that subscribe and like button. I really appreciate it. Well, let's get straight into some questions here. JB, good to have you on the call. Julian Bradley, good to have you on the call too. Another JB. You were starting to say do you think there's a potential that NIO could reach 1,000 in the next 5 years? As always, guys, bear in mind, this isn't financial advice. This is just me entertaining you and sort of sharing my thoughts. Well, how would that work? So if you look at, we look at revenue growth as a sort of a broad indicator of where NIO is heading, and assuming, and I am assuming that their net margins are going to be much better than Tesla's. Why is that? They're putting high-end cars with better margins. I think we're expecting sort of a 20% margin there rather. So if you look at, say, in this year, 2021, say they're going to sell 100,000 cars. I mean, it could be a bit more, but say they're going to sell 100,000 cars. So if you then take that, and I've got my trusted calculator here. So if they sell 100,000 cars in this year 1, and then they double it in year 2, right? That's 200,000 cars. In year 3, they double it again. Just say that's 400,000 cars. And then in year 3, so that's still 3, 1 to 200,000. Yeah. So in year 3, then they get to 800,000 cars. Now, for that, they'd have to basically sell outside of China. In China, I think their market is about 650,000 cars, because that's what BMW and Mercedes can get there. So if you then want to double that again, say in year 4, and I'm being a little bit generous here, you get to 1.6 million cars, right? If you then double that again in year 5, you get to 3.2 million cars. Now that, I think, is possibly above where they could go. Why do I say that? Well, the world buys something like 10 million high-end cars, and 4 million of those or so are bought in China. So even if they have a very good market share in China, I think they would struggle there to essentially reach more than 20% of the market. I think that'll be quite a difficult one. So say in year 5, that's a little bit one. So stick to year 4, say. So if you then take the stock price at the moment, and just for the sake of argument, say it's 55 this year, and then say next year it's 110. That's year 1 then, right? And then times 2 again in year 2 it's 220. Times 2 again in year 3 is 440. Times 2 again in year 4 rather. It is 880. My fingers can count. I can't. So then you get to $888. I mean, that's a massive simplification, of course. And there could be other revenue streams. There could be better margins. There could be, other opportunities. Car companies, these EV companies, could be looked at differently to car companies, because they could essentially be sort of service software subscription businesses would therefore attract higher valuation, power businesses, all that kind of stuff. So you could make the argument. I mean, that gets us to 880, and I haven't obviously tweaked anything to do with margins or taken out any kind of concern some people seem to have with there being some state shareholdings in there and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a possibility, but once you get to that 650,000 or so figure in China, you then need to really grow abroad to really push the envelope up from the 650,000. And that's why this Europe announcement and the slightly earlier US announcement, they are so very important, I think, for the long-term growth of NIO, because we can see NIO growing very successfully in China, but to get beyond that, we need to really hit something else. So I hope that answers your question there, the two of you really at the top here, Mo and Matish. Thank you for that. Lots more guys on the call here. Julian, hello. Gary Lau, hey, Braveheart. One of our lovely loyal members there. Hello, Gary. Good to have you on the call. Sam from Yorkshire Investing. Gov't, what do you think about NIO today? We'll talk about that. Good morning. Is NIO launch US confirmed by the company? Okay, we'll cover that too. Zubai here from Michigan. Welcome. No way, this is not Bitcoin. No, this is not Bitcoin. Absolutely not. Farrakhan, NIO, Aliem taking consideration, it's sort of a luxury car. Actually, Li Bin, the CEO, said last week in an interview, and I check out my video on that, he said it's not a luxury car. He said it's a high-end car. He makes the distinction because he says high-end cars, well, the market is sort of 10 million a year in the world, whereas luxury cars are sort of your Bentley, Rolls-Royce, and that's very few cars, and of course some sports cars. So I think that's kind of how they want to position themselves, as a high-end car. I have 235 of NIO now, woohoo, says L. Fantastic. I love your enthusiasm. Good to have you on the call. So really, I mean, I think there's a couple of things we've been seeing this week. We saw the industrial park. I think that's a really good announcement for two reasons, because basically the Chinese government have made a lot of money from bailing NIO out, and now they're selling back 3% of the shares. And that's in addition to the 10% they were basically diluted out of. So the government now owns less than 10%. That 3% would have made them way over $1 billion US, probably 1.2, possibly a bit more than that US dollars. So they're reinvesting that in an industrial EV park with research and facilities and pilot schemes and all the stuff right around NIO, and NIO is going to be jointly building that with them. So basically NIO is getting the money back that they made the government for bailing them out. So I think that's a real win-win story there. A really positive story, I think, for NIO. Because it just goes to show, I mean, I keep saying this government support is very positive. And I know some people disagree with that. They don't like government support, and government meddling long-term, perhaps not the greatest idea. But when you have a startup that is basically underwritten by the government, as NIO appears to be, then I think that's a big positive. We've also had a couple of ratings out. We had Jeffries, not so positive. They got a hold at $60. Deutsche still hasn't updated their target, which was from November, at $50. So that's a bit old. So let's ignore that. But Morgan Stanley came out with $80 US and buy. And then Nomura just started their coverage. Well, not just, but about 10 days ago. So at $80.30. So you got two big investment banks there, Nomura and Morgan Stanley, rooting for $80 US. Basically, they're saying that's where their target is, which I think is positive. It gives us a positive direction. Now, I know some people are saying, but the share price is just moving sideways. And I get what you're saying there, but look, just look at the last 6 months or so, what the NIO share price has done, and you just have to allow for, well, at least I allow for sort of horizontal movements, retesting support. And yes, NIO is putting out great news stories, but in many ways that's priced in. The market expects and needs these positive news stories to support what is a pretty, pretty high valuation. I think most people will probably agree with that. Can it go higher? Well, everything can always go higher or lower. So please make up your own mind there, guys. As always, this isn't financial advice. But I mean, I think we are seeing a lot of positivity rolling out there. I think once they get into Europe this year and they get into Norway this year with the full kind of fanfare of the NIO brand, NIO house, battery swapping and all that stuff, and that takes off in Norway, which hopefully it will, then you're going to start see that being rolled out through Scandinavia, probably UK, Netherlands, Denmark, etc. And then we have to kind of see how well that performs, because that basically opens up a separate growth trajectory for selling cars that I think most analysts aren't really looking at. I think most analysts are looking up to 650,000 cars being sold in China. That seems very realistic to me. And then what happens? Well, that's kind of where we hit a wall. So we kind of struggle to see beyond 2025 valuations at the moment. And that's, of course, where Tesla has that major advantage. So they're opening up all these factories around the world, and that gives them that trajectory, and they're doing well in a lot of growth markets, including China. So thanks for all the question. Is NIO going to be forced to produce a $25,000 car in order to compete with Teslas? Help them increase their market share, Rika? No, I really don't think so. I think, check out that video I did on an interview with actually the CEO and co-founder, and I think that gives you a bit of a feel for the company. They are a high-end car manufacturer, well, or brand. I know some people say they're not a manufacturer. And they want to be at that price point because they want to be able to use the latest part, the latest tech, and that stuff's expensive, and they want to maintain a high gross margin. So no, I don't think they are directly going to compete with Tesla. I think they're going to stick in that high-end segment. I think they're going to follow more the sort of BMW playbook. So they might bring out smaller cars, but they will still be more expensive than Teslas, and people will just need to buy into the brand that allows them to basically have a higher margin. Ali M, there, really appreciate your kind words. You deserve a clap for real. Much appreciated that. Well, if you give me a like and if you share our videos, you will help me even more. So thanks for that. Schlaxer says, I don't care about the current price. I buy every month regardless of the price. NIO will 10x in a few years. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, sort of average pricing with stocks, there is a theory behind that. I get why you're doing that. John Cooper there, so he always says, I'm the posh Matthew McConaughey. Is that how you pronounce that? McConaughey? I don't know. But that's very kind of you. I don't care about the current price. I think the only reason NIO is worth more now is 95% because it's Chinese. I think it's the only reason NIO is more worth now is 95%. What do you mean there, Janos? Do you mean it's worth more because it's Chinese or because it isn't? Because generally speaking, look at US investors or international investors looking at Chinese cars. There's usually a discount on that. The NIO might perhaps be the exception to that. What do you think is the price target end of February, says Jojo? I think with such high volatility stocks, it's quite hard to sort of pinpoint where something is going to land. I mean, I always say I'm happy to buy the stock up to about $80. I can sort of see it going to that. Beyond that, I need to see a lot more sales. And January numbers were great, true. Let's see what February numbers hold out. Rumor is they are quite good. But really, we need to see kind of the next quarter of numbers, I think, and see that they are going to smash, hopefully, 100,000 vehicle deliveries for the year. I think a lot of this also depends on just where Tesla's going. Tesla hasn't had a particularly strong week. Why is that? Well, because of all the noise happening in the stock market in the US particularly. So, there are kind of event-driven things that take investors' minds off a stock's fundamentals. And they just look at all the stuff that's going on, and people are pulling out of equities a little bit, though there is a bit of a recovery in the market, and that's positive. So I think it's quite hard to pinpoint with something like this because volatility is just part of it. When you have something that's exploded like the NIO stock has over the last 6 months, you are going to have some bumpy bits down the road, and that's just what you expect. I think, look at the Tesla stock price over the last 6 months or so. If you zoom in a bit, you see quite a lot of bumps and kinks in there, and that's just normal. So I think for me, it's more of a long-term thing. Jalo says it's the only reason why NIO isn't worth more because it's Chinese. Yeah, you could argue that. Although given the valuation, I think that's probably the only Chinese stock that doesn't have a big China discount on it. I mean, look at Alibaba. To me, that looks very undervalued. As always, guys, not financial advice, just my thoughts, my entertainment. So there you really have that. But with NIO, people don't seem to really make the association so much with being Chinese in China. And maybe that's because of Tesla. People just think, well, it's the closest thing to compete. Well, not compete, but sort of fall in that kind of Tesla drag of fabulousness. And therefore, people want to invest in it perhaps for that reason. So that might explain it. But yeah, I see your comment there. Angelo, Alibaba, how's that going? Okay, we're gonna get back to Alibaba if you like in a little bit, but let's talk about NIO some more. I think the software that NIO will be providing is really overlooked. Also, once They build up the subscription fees collected for battery swaps will be massive. The monthly revenue without new sales. Says Louise there. Thank you for that comment. I do think subscription revenue for all of these EV manufacturers, obviously Tesla included, will be very substantial. Basically, the full self-driving we saw on NIO Day, that was a fairly expensive offering and everybody was cheering. And they're happy to pay that. Same for the batteries. People are happy to pay more, which also means as the batteries increase in capacity, the company can actually charge them more, right? They can upgrade them. And who doesn't love a subscription business? Well, analysts certainly do. It's the easiest thing in the world to model is a subscription business. You've got positive cash flow coming in at the beginning of every month, and you basically just have to multiply that number. And that's why, you know, Microsoft is gearing for a subscription. You know, Google through YouTube is, of course, Netflix and all that sort of stuff. Everybody wants subscription business because you just charge people's credit cards once a month, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's so easy to get that money once you've got people signed up. Look at Amazon with their Prime. They have a 90% renewal rate on subscription. So if you do a good job and you have subscribers, they basically stick around. Speaking of subscribers, guys, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you haven't, why haven't you? Tell me in the chat. So and also hit that like button, guys. For every like, I donate 1 cent to the Gentle Barn Sanctuary. We did our first donation this morning, $84, and that was just for 1 week, our first week of doing it. So for February, we're going to collect a lot more. Let's get to 8x on that number. That's my target for that next donation. Come to join my new Discord, guys. Thanks, that's very kind of you. New is a long-term play, 1 or 2 years, not 1 to 2 days, says Steve there. I very much agree with you, Steve. I think the volatility is such that it's not something I would want to buy and sell on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. But yeah, I think the story there is, you know, EVs rolling out, numbers going up, them gearing up, them growing their expansion, you know, new factory coming out, capacity increasing to, you know, 150,000 cars or so, you know, all that stuff that they are doing. That's really the long-term play there. I totally agree with you. Rika, where do you think the stock will be in 2022 if NIO is producing 150,000 to 200,000 cars? Well, I think, you know, the market doesn't really look so much backwards. Generally speaking, the market looks forward. So it's always like next year's and the years after's potential earnings. And what's the story with that? So in China, we can see that trajectory, right? We can see them, say, doubling car numbers every year. And we can see them getting to about 650,000 cars a year sold. And that's kind of where it shuts down. Why? Because that's the market share that BMW has, what Mercedes has. And these are similar price points. And it's kind of difficult at this price point to go beyond that. And NIO says they don't want to go below that price point. And I can see why. They want to have good margins and they want to put the latest tech in. That's the brand. You know, you don't get a cheap BMW, do you? You get smaller ones, but they're still more expensive than a similar sized car from another car manufacturer. So really, I think what is going to be really important is to watch this year as we see the rollout, for example, into Europe. And we see, you know, in 2022, then when, you know, we have the new ET7 out and stuff, and you get into full self-driving, at least sort of on a sort of level 4, level 5 in China. I think China will be the first country there to really allow that from a regulatory point of view. You have to see those revenue streams and see, hey, well, this is where we are now. Where can they go next year? So a lot of that is up in the air when a company is this young, because, okay, they're selling 7,000 cars a month. That's brilliant to where they were a year ago, because a year ago they were selling anything. Okay, also COVID, but, you know. And so just getting to 15,000 cars next year, that's very nice, you know, per month, that is. But you kind of need to see more of the future. And I think that's kind of what we need to see. And that's what they're trying to perform, I think. And that's why they're showing us cars they're going to put out in 2 years' time, because they're trying to give us visibility. But for me, the visibility so far is in China. I don't have the visibility yet on Europe, because how, you know, are European customers going to accept a Chinese car? Now, all our commentators here, all of our members, subscribers in Europe and the US, they all say, yes, I would totally buy a NIO. Don't care where it's built. And of course, it doesn't really matter, because, I mean, look at most cars, they are built with 50% Chinese parts anyway. So it isn't really a question of that. Look at Apple, that's basically 100% made in China, and it's a very, very high quality product. So that mindset, though, is something that the market, I think, needs to test. We need to see how many are they selling. Now, we saw XPeng today. They're shipping a second batch of cars to Scandinavia. That's a positive because it isn't the first one. That's the second one. So obviously, they are able to sell those. They're able to shift those. So I think for this stock to really keep rallying at this rate, we need to see more facts on future earnings streams there and future margins, of course. Lots of questions here. Really appreciate it, guys. NIO is going to pay for my holiday in Rio. Okay, sounds good. And if you can travel, I think a bit of a caveat there. Sorry about that. Lucid rallied so fast that they haven't even got a car out on the road. I think they only have one car. Says Janice, yeah, you know what? There are a lot of stocks at the moment that have basically no fundamentals, no earnings, no manufacturing, no IP, nothing, no sales, and they are valued in the moon. I'm not saying that's exactly where Lucid is, but there is quite a lot of that, just a lot of basically hot money from provided by the government and central banks that's trying to find somewhere for a return. So you see these kind of crazy movements. I would still prefer to be in a company where I can really see what's going on. Now, Lucid might do a great job, but at the moment that is a lot. I think it's a lot of speculation in there rather than a lot of fact. Damien, can you realistically hit 1K one day? That would be a 2 trillion market cap. Yeah, your market cap number there is pretty insane, isn't it? Well, I think it depends on, does this EV sentiment continue? Look at the UK, for example, right? ICE cars, new ones will be outlawed by 2030. So therefore, everything that will be bought will then be EVs. Now, of course, that'll spread across a lot of car manufacturers. So you kind of need to look at, and it's what we did at the very beginning of this call, if you double deliveries every year out, I could see that for about 4 years out. And then the share price could, in theory, double every 4 years out with things like subscription and better margins and, I don't know, them reinventing the wheel a little bit. That would get you to about 880 on that sort of basis. A very simplified way of looking at it, but it's one way of looking at it. But all of it really depends, I think, on Tesla. I think really Tesla needs to keep performing and NIO will kind of follow in that trajectory. Yeah, 1K by 2025, no doubt, says Anne. Thanks for sharing that. Too much NIO videos every day, but nothing happens, says Techno Asia there. Yeah, you know what? I don't make the market. I don't intend to make the market. I don't intend to give financial advice. I just sort of give news. Sometimes the news are good. I think this was a good news week. And, other times the news aren't so good. Oh my God, look what I've got here. I've got the NIO cat, our little mascot here, joining the call. She's always bullish on NIO, at least when she's napping. So, the market doesn't necessarily react to instant positive news. The market gets distracted by all sorts of noise, and we had a lot of noise last week. And then also Tesla sort of went a bit horizontally, and that impacts NIO. There's a fairly strong correlation there between the two. And, well, look at some companies. We had a lot of good tech numbers out last week, and the market completely ignored them. And that's just because of everything that was going on with GameStop and stock rather than everything. So the market isn't that sort of rational being that looks at great news today, great numbers today, and then jumps. It really doesn't always do that. And, look at, we got really good Alibaba numbers out. Share price doesn't move all that much. It has moved a bit, but it jumped when Jack Ma appeared on a charity video. So, the market isn't a rational beast, at least not in the short term. I think in the long term it might be, but in the short term you have to just kind of like have some patience. At least that's the way I look at it. As always, guys, not financial advice. One of my friends says, John, he got rich on Tesla stocks. He just held them many years and he still holds them. I sold all mine after battery day. He said a sad smiley. Well, hopefully you made some money on that, Janice. Thanks for sharing that story. Yeah, 1K by 2025, says Ange. Tag any friends, buy more NIO or Tesla. What do you guys all think? Interesting one. I mean, a lot of people take the view that they are just happy with Tesla. They think Tesla makes the market. Therefore, Tesla is the sort of a core stock of the EV sector. So they just want to stick with Tesla. And other people kind of see perhaps a parallel opportunity, particularly in China. Sorry, my cat keeps roaring here. Excited about NIO, she is. And, that Tesla obviously is doing very, very well in China, but there might be opportunities where Chinese brands might actually do better. And I'm leaning a little bit towards that. I think Tesla will do a good job, but I think there are opportunities like robo-taxis and things like that, things that really involve government contracts, government licensing, where I imagine the Chinese companies will be somewhat favored. Just as you see, Biden says, we want to buy EV cars, 650,000, but we want to buy American. So that's kind of my take on it. I think there is a parallel story there. I think both are very interesting from my point of view. Chandrahas, thanks for joining us. Is NIO overvalued considering its burn rate? For every 50,000 revenue, they're burning 100,000. Additionally, with the current electric rates, their profits from BAS will be peanuts. I think you probably watched a video there from Sven and Mr. P and Chandras, and that's great. I love the guys. I think that the burn rate is an odd one to look at. If you look at investment in the past and then look at what it costs going futures for the car coming out for a new company, you're always going to come up with numbers like that. When Tesla builds a factory, they put the money up front, and therefore the cars that come out of that factory, you could argue the first 100,000 are loss making. So it's a kind of an odd way of looking at it. That is just what happens when you build new companies. You invest money and then your profit comes down the road per piece. In terms of electricity rates, yeah, I saw that video on electricity rates. I think the electricity rates in that video were overdone. Certainly industrial rates are a lot cheaper. It is a cost for them. I totally agree with you that it is a cost for them. And they are doing that to build out as a sort of marketing expense. That's the way I would look at it. I think this cash burn rate is a little overdone. Look at what Morgan Stanley is saying. They think that NIO could actually be profitable. They predict that NIO will be profitable in 2021. So their gross margins are improving. Their cash burn is reducing as they are ramping up production, ramping up sales. So I think those stories were interesting. I think it's good to critically sort of think about those things. I've actually done videos on both of those subjects. So do check that out after our live here, and just see whether what side you come down on, and just taking both points of view. I think that's always the important thing. There are some headlines out. There's a headline out today. Someone took a ARK Invest quote, and she said, literally, will NIO be, the one that succeed or something? And then she says, we'll have to wait and see. And obviously the quote takes out the wait and see and makes the headline. ARK Invest says NIO will succeed, and it's just like super oversimplification. And I get why people do it. People want to get a headline. I also want to get headlines. It's kind of the way this YouTube world works. But you have to kind of be careful and just like look at the source and see like what's fact, what's fiction, and sometimes people do negative videos on something to also get a reaction out of it. It is kind of, I think it's good to watch the positives and the negatives and then come to your own conclusion. At least that'd be my advice. But Chandra, thanks you very much for putting that up here as a question. It goes to show you are really listening and thinking about these things, and that's fantastic. And there says 2025 EV car will boom. Tiger Lily, get in Felix. Sorry, I just jumped here. So many questions. That's fantastic, guys. We will go through them all. I just lost a few here. There's so many. If I miss you guys, shout. Zizi, would you buy a NIO car? Yes, absolutely. Why on earth not? They look like fantastic cars. They're not available yet in Hong Kong. I'm in Hong Kong here. It is China, but we are different. We drive on the left side of the road because it was British before, whereas China drives on the right. So we haven't got those cars yet. It tends to take car manufacturers a little bit longer. Basically, till they enter the UK, that's when we get the cars. So we haven't got it yet. Desmond Chan there, good evening to you, one of our lovely members. See that lovely new sticker there next to his name. If you want that guy, hit the join button. Giovan, maybe you can do a video critiquing his numbers and thesis. Whose numbers and thesis are you talking about, Giovan? Let me know, and I'll gladly look at that. Stock and mining companies for lithium, you see a chance on those stocks? I do actually, and I have actually done a video on that also, so do check that out. Yes, I think that is an interesting play. I think also the battery play is an interesting one, because you're then no longer betting on the success of any particular car company or EV company. You are basically just saying, well, they're all going to need lithium or whatever it is. So it is a bit more of a broader raw materials play on the EV sector. So yeah, I think it's an interesting one. There's so much good news about NIO when we're going to the moon, says Alicia Chang there. Thanks very much. Well, as I was saying, it's been a really good positive news week, and not every news week has been positive on NIO. The market, I think, is distracted, and it just sort of absorbed this information, I think, more in the medium and long term, not necessarily week by week. Angela, you're going to buy a NIO car when the stock hits 200. Fantastic. I would buy soon a new EV cars, a lease it from Denmark, one of the most expensive cars, tax and that we have in the world. 180% tax on new cars, and I can get a new with no tax. Janice, okay, so that's why EVs are doing so well in Denmark. Thanks for sharing that with us, Janice. Well, NIO's European operations manager is based in Denmark, and he was working at Tesla for 4 years and 8 months. Before that, he was at Harley Davidson doing exactly the same thing, rolling out the operations of Tesla in Europe. So I think that sounds like a good hire there. And I suspect after Norway, you're probably going to be one of the first where to get NIOs. Desmond, tagging in friends. Hi. Good to have you on the call. SSS PPP, what is NIO markets in China? Wealthiest 1%, wealthiest 5% for core brand. No, I think the wealthiest 1%, they're driving around in sort of, Rolls Royces and Bentleys and Ferraris and sports cars. This is it's basically your BMW, your Mercedes driver, who are well off, sort of higher end middle class, I would say. And that's very much the target. And that's a sizable car market in China. That market is basically 4 million cars sold per year, or maybe 3.5 million if you want to be conservative, sold per year, which is about 40% of the world's high-end car market. And the high-end excludes the luxury sector, because that's really a different world altogether. So yeah, thanks for that question there. That's an interesting one. Indiana there, I believe NIO, when everyone they're going bankrupt, they have advantage of a Tesla at this point. Time will tell. Okay, good on you. You must have made quite a nice return there. Xiaomi, with all the good news about NIO lately, we all know that the big hedge funds really affect the stock price. I'm sure in the coming months, more and more hedge funds will follow NIO. Yeah, interesting you say that. I looked at today actually at, I wrote it down here, at what funds have bought in. There's been a bit in Q3, Q4, CNB Bank, Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Nelson van Denberg and Campbell Wealth Management. They've all upped their stakes, but not like massively. MEAG Munich, Ergo also, but not huge positions there, at least that we've seen yet. But yes, I mean, hopefully we're going to see more institutions going in on this. Yejide, apologies if I mispronounce your name. While NIO is bullish on the long term, will the lockdown impact? I did not see much movement in 1 year. You haven't seen much stock movement in 1 year? Please pull up a stock chart and look at what the stock has done in a year. It's been absolutely fantastic. The lockdown, maybe you're talking about the lockdown, not much movement there. So in China, the lockdowns are pretty minor. You have some in some local areas, but they're basically not locking down whole towns or whole provinces. They're locking down specific buildings or small parts of a city, and then they test everyone. And that's the same thing we're seeing here in Hong Kong. Every day they're selecting a couple of buildings where they've found a case or several cases, or where they've assessed the sewage that comes out of those buildings. That's what they're doing now. That must be a lovely job, hey? Look for COVID and sewage, and then they see that, and it comes out of these 5 towers, 10 towers. They lock them down without announcement, and then within about 12 hours they've tested everybody in the building, and they lift the lockdown again. They basically do it overnight. And so these lockdowns are not that disruptive. I mean, not wonderful if you live in them, but it's a pretty short period of time. So you haven't got large-scale lockdowns in China. In fact, we're going to see next week, Chinese New Year, there will be 1 billion journeys taken, proper flight, airplane, train, bus journeys, long-term coach journeys in China. And that just goes to show how COVID isn't a huge item. Now, they're massively vigilant, and when they do see them, yes, they do lock areas down. But that's because they want to make sure that it doesn't spread. So people are walking around in China. They're traveling, they're flying. All my friends in China, they're like, flying to the beach and to this mountain, and they're having a good time. You don't have to wear masks in most of China nowadays because it is that under control. And that's basically, and you might disagree with that, and I see the privacy point, but basically they track, right? Everybody is basically tracked through an app. And that means if you ever had contact with anybody, you get a different color on your phone, and that means you have to stay at home. Or if you've really been in contact with people, then you basically, well, you have to get tested within a short period of time. It's obligatory. It's the law. That's how they're dealing with it. I know that isn't feasible in the US or in Europe, but that's how they're dealing with it. From a software, from a sort of cloud AI point of view, it's quite a smart process. So thanks for that question there, Janice. Right, Damien, thanks, Felix. I missed the first part of the call, Damien. Okay, we can do a very quick roundup, really. I mean, we had a lot of good news this week, basically. We have that industrial park being built jointly with the government. Why? Because the government bailed NIO out, right? And now NIO is diluting the government out, and they've just bought back 3% shares there for about $800 million US. And basically the government, just on those 3%, have made way over $1 billion US. I would estimate about 1.2 to 1.5 billion US from when they bought in April to now. And what are they doing with that money? Well, they're reinvesting it to build an EV industrial park, basically around NIO. NIO is building it jointly. It's going to have state-of-the-art R&D and research, pilot schemes, all that stuff. And that's fantastic for NIO because they're getting that ecosystem and the government's paying for it with the money they made out of the bailout. So really everybody's happy. And that also means that the government now owns less than 10% of NIO. And that'll make some people happy who have not been happy with this state ownership here from that bailout. We saw this sort of early news of a planning of a US launch. They're hiring somebody in China to basically build a business plan. And then the Europe launch is much more advanced. To have in Denmark Tesla's former European operations manager. That's who they hired. He was with Tesla for almost 5 years. He's based in Denmark. He's been a car guy and a motorbike guy. He was a Harley Davidson before for decades. And you're seeing in Norway and Oslo, they're really hiring people. They're going to open NIO House there. They're hiring the staff for that. They're going to have battery swapping in Norway. They're going to have their own power chargers in Norway. They really are ramping up the full from workshop to sales to customer service, the whole thing. And that's interesting to see. If you missed that video, guys, do check it out. I put it out, I think, yesterday or the day before. So check out my NIO playlist there. So that's kind of, a lot of positive news there. Morgan Stanley told us they thought NIO would be profitable in 2021. I mean, by a slither, of course, but that would be, I think, establish more trust and belief that NIO can be profitable long term. On the downside, we've had some criticism on cash burn. We just touched on that. We had criticism on the bailout. I think that's largely aimed not at the bailout, but just some people's dislike for foreign governments interfering. And you can make the same argument for the US government's bailed out, GM and Ford, and Tesla has received hundreds of millions of subsidies. So, but I'm going to leave the politics out of that. Everybody can make up their own views on what they think of that. So lots more questions, guys, here. That's fantastic. We'll go through them. Gary Lau, 600,000 units is assuming Merck and BMW end up selling no cars. Gary, no, not at all. I think the market is actually still growing. Mercedes and BMW are going to continue to sell their sort of 600 to 650,000 cars a year in China, growing somewhat. And of course, they are also launching a lot of EVs. So some of them will also be EVs. But I think when you look at the price point and the positioning, I think this is just my take, guys. I think there is a big gap in the market for a high-end Chinese car brand because there aren't any. And the whole sentiment in China has changed over the last 10 years from people wanting to buy imported goods to people actually really appreciating the made in China brand. Part of that is it predates Trump, but some of that is also a sort of reactionary move to that whole, China bashing that the US was doing. So people have actually more pride in made in China goods, and they know China can make fantastic tech. I mean, look at iPhones, right? Where are they made? Well, they're made in China. So I think there is a big gap for that here. Why is the government driving around in basically Audis, which are, okay, they're made in China 50-50 with sort of, well, not quite 50-50 anymore, but, a joint venture with Volkswagen. But of course, they'd prefer to drive something that was wholly 100% Chinese owned. And I think the same applies for a lot of people as sort of national pride has grown quite a lot in a positive way. I think largely, I think people are just initially 10 years, 15 years ago, people were quite cautious about a lot of things made in China. and that has really changed. And that's because they have these tech champions. They've got great brands like, Xiaomi and Huawei, all these brands. So people are actually now preferring, a lot of people at least, preferring something made in China than not. And our Chinese friends here, you are very welcome to disagree with me on that. I'd love to hear your thoughts as always. Anthony there, price predictions today. Anthony, I mean, I had a quick look at the technicals. There isn't a huge amount of positivity in that, to be honest with you. I think it's going to continue to move somewhat horizontally. And that's got more to do with the market than with NIO, and it's got also more to do with the way Tesla is moving. So I think for me, this is a medium, long-term kind of stock. Steve Bone there, you're being a little a little aggressive towards Tesla. Okay. And this is making sure NIO succeeds. I think the government support I mean, the facts that I'm looking at, and maybe I'm looking it through my glasses here from Hong Kong. The bailout was well done. They got a discount on the share price at the time, a 15% discount. They got their shares, so they kind of did it as on an arm's length deal. And now they are pulling out of it. They're using the money to actually reinvest it into essentially NIO's ecosystem. So I think you really couldn't hope for much more there. Janice, it makes sense. Right, guys, what are you talking about here? Someone's excited about TSMP. Okay, fair enough. What's your NIO price prediction end of 2021? It says Razin there. Volatility is pretty strong on this, so I think you can't sort of pinpoint numbers. At the moment, I'm saying I'm happy to buy up till 80. I think we should go to a 3-digit number by the end of the year. As always, guys, not financial advice, just my thought and my entertainment. But a lot of that depends on, Tesla delivering as they will likely to. And the more Tesla delivers and the more factories they open and the more successful they are, I think NIO kind of follows in that trend. So I think that's kind of the slight caveat there. But yeah, I do think, provided they, smash the 100,000 vehicle numbers by the end of the year, maybe they're going to surprise us and give us 150,000 or something in between those two. And, we'll be in Europe at some point in 2021. Provided all those things go well, I think this is going to be into the triple digits here. Bruce says there's a lot of talk about NIO bleeding money in battery swap stations and NIO houses, 150 million a year. It's being spent on fluff. Hope this isn't an issue for NIO in the future, says Bruce. Now, the first one to bring that up, Bruce, I appreciate that. I mean, there are basically two videos out, one by Sven and one by Mr. P, who both kind of came up with this thing. I actually have done videos on both of them, so if you really want to get into that, do. The NIO houses, that number that Mr. P's come up there of sort of 50 to 100 million rent for each. It might be true for Beijing and sort of real flagship stores in Shanghai. It probably isn't true for other cities in China. They tend to be cheaper in terms of rent. And those are basically flagship stores, right? It's kind of like the Louis Vuitton flagship store or Apple flagship store. They'd never make money. There are sales shops. I mean, they're not just houses, they're not just lounges, very much sales environments. And actually, Mr. P said, a friend took me to a NIO house, and that's when I bought a NIO. So, they do work. But it is a branding investment. It's just like, in the past, people would have spent money on full-page adverts and magazines. That doesn't really exist anymore. So this is the kind of brand building thing you do. You put in great locations in main cities, those things. But yeah, of course, it's a cost. So is it cash waste, I guess you have to ask yourself. Do you think that investment pays off from a brand building point of view? Because you do have to build a brand if you want to sell a premium car. And then the battery stations, again, I've also done a video of that. I think his electricity prices might be a little bit on the high side there in that video to come up with those numbers. But yes, it does cost them money. They are basically, you're buying a car, you're buying a battery, you're renting it, and you then get a certain number of free charges, 4 or 6, depending on what plan you're on. And that does cost them money, absolutely. But you are also paying a subscription. You bought a car, they made a margin on that. And these numbers are not like hidden. I guess that's really my point. If you look at the quarterly accounts, that expense is in there, right? So it's not like it's something that they're kind of sweeping under the carpet that nobody knows about. So it's not a surprise. It isn't really a surprise to analysts, to anybody who's looking at the stock price. It is public knowledge, basically. I think it's an interesting point. I think it's always good to look at both sides of the story. If you want, check out my videos on both of those and just look at both sides of the argument and kind of come to your own conclusion. I think that's always the good thing when people kind of bash something and boost something. Like, look at both and you'll probably have a reasonable answer somewhere in the middle. I mean, that's at least what I think. Great, lots more questions, guys, here. Next earnings, please. That's a good question. End of the month, basically. So we're going to obviously be covering that in full detail, as always. You guys talking about some other stocks here. Bruce Wayne, they're building a brand culture and brand awareness. Yeah, I think that's really basically the idea there. And of course, they're going to spend money on that. And it's just that marketing spend, I think, has moved over the years to obviously digital. But these kind of brick and mortar flagship stores do still seem to be quite effective because people actually walk in, you can engage with them, and you can actually build a relationship there. People buy on emotions, like a lot of times with stocks, as Janice there. Precisely, you walk in. I mean, you walk into an Apple store, right, and just think, "Wow, look at this thing." They want, in Hong Kong, it's just fantastic. It's all glass and high ceilings and 2 floors, and everyone's in there, everyone's excited. You walk in, and you kind of think, "I should buy something, shouldn't I?" So that's the kind of, I think, engagement that is created by that. Daniel says there, NIO is my first investment. I own 465 shares at $46. I'm in no rush to sell, but I need an exit strategy. Any advice? The first thought will be taking my initial investment once it's doubled. Daniel, I mean, as always, I can't give you financial advice. I can only sort of entertain and share my thoughts. I mean, I think anybody who's investing, diversification is a name of the game. Your strategy there, I think, is quite an Asian one, really. People tend to do precisely that. They sort of take out the money they put in, and then after that, they think everything is profit. And that's a sensible way of going about it because then it allows you to diversify. I always think diversify, guys. Giovanni, a YouTuber provided some math that shows that NIO Q1 2020 could be profitable with 21,000 car sold. Can you do a video critiquing his numbers? Channel name is Finance in Banking Explained. Thanks very much. I'll write that down. I'll have a look at that. See whether that makes sense. I mean, it sort of depends. With these kind of companies, do they want to be that profitable in the short term? You know, Amazon used to give us a profitable quarter once a year because that was a way they could show the world we could be profitable if we didn't invest so much. And NIO isn't investing billions in building factories and stuff, although they're now going to spend some money on that industrial park. So half of that, I think, is going to come out of them. And they're spending money on, obviously, marketing and rolling out and, rolling out into Europe and all that kind of stuff, research. So, yeah, I'll gladly look at that. I think that's an interesting one. Morgan Stanley did forecast that they would be profitable in 2021 by a slither, and that would be a fantastic thing to come true, even if it's just by a fraction. If they're profitable by $100, it would be fantastic, because the headlines would be NIO in the black, NIO makes profit, turns a corner, all that kind of thing. So, Daniel, fantastic. I appreciate you enjoy. Both Daniels. We've got Daniel Green and Daniel Pang there. It's the Daniel live chat. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your kind comments. Desmond says, when travelers are allowed to go, we should go to the nearest NIO store. Absolutely. We should go pop over to Shenzhen and have a look and film it. Michael there, good morning to Portland. Have you ever thought about doing a workshop regarding research and analysis? Yeah, I'm thinking about doing something like that. I'd quite like to do a bit of a series on my thoughts of how to invest and diversify and, compounding and how to do some research on stocks, kind of what to look at. And yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. You bring that up there. I appreciate that, Michael. I would like to get to do something like that. I need a little bit less news that I have to cover to get to that. But yeah, I might have a look at that over the weekend if there's a little bit less noise out in the market. So thanks very much for that. Philco has a concern with NIO's P/S ratio. It's currently sitting at 48, higher than Tesla's 25. That an indication that it might be overvalued. Look, it's a fair view. I mean, these valuations are high by historic comparisons, both Tesla's and NIO's, of course. Tesla is, if NIO is basically, if this is the sort of growth chart of a company and of young to old, Tesla is somewhere up here and NIO is just at the beginning. And NIO are giving, investors are giving NIO the benefit of the doubt that they're going to be able to follow through on what they are kind of promising and what we're expecting. And that wouldn't have happened to Tesla. Look at the Tesla stock. It took kind of years to really take off. So NIO has that advantage there of basically Tesla making the market, and therefore the valuation is higher. That's really my way to explain it. I'm not saying to you it's low or high, but well, actually, I think it's high from my point of view, but as always, not financial advice. Come to your own conclusion on that. Bruce Wayne, yeah, okay, I understand. Okay. Emil here's asking in German whether Chinese companies pay dividends. Yes, of course, lots of them pay dividends. Obviously, NIO doesn't. It'd be insanity if they did. Why would they raise money here to give it back to us or the other way? That wouldn't make any sense. But yeah, of course, lots of companies pay dividends. I mean, just type into Google a couple of Chinese companies and you'll see the dividend there. It's just that a lot of the times the ones we're talking about, like Alibaba, Tencent, NIO, Xpeng and stuff, they are very much in their growth stage. So they are reinvesting that money. Though Alibaba has started to do a bit of buybacks and they're sitting on $78 billion in terms of renminbi. So potentially you might see some dividends there, but investors are also cautious with growth stocks. They kind of think, well, shouldn't you have somewhere to put that money that would put it to better use than just give it back to me? And you know, if they can put it into something that basically gives a higher return on that investment, then from an investor point of view, I would prefer that, because then, you know, the stock price goes up more. So, yeah, but of course, lots of Chinese companies pay dividends. Reactionist, how diversified are you? I'm reasonably diversified. I put quite a lot of my money into actually a couple of mutual funds, and I've talked about them a little bit in my sort of videos on, you know, the crash and how to diversify and those sort of things. So do check them out. I like some value funds that then give me exposure. I mean, still to stuff like Facebook and Apple and stuff like that, but you know, there are subscription businesses. They're fairly steady, and that way I can buy 30 stocks without having to watch 30 stocks every day if I think the guys running the funds are doing a decent job. And then it means on my time I can, you know, buy Baba stock and NIO stock because I follow that particularly closely, as an example. So for me, diversification is what allows me to sleep at night. Felix, how's the interest in shorts for NIO? I haven't looked that up for a little while. Ricardo, I think basically all shorts are pretty much down. Throughout last year, they were sort of at between 20 and 30, which is high, very high in fact. And then they sort of came back down to about 8 or 9 last time I looked, which was a couple of days ago. So I would expect the whole short world is a little bit scared at present. So I would imagine that's still relatively low. The option of delisting is out of the question now, says Gabriel. I never really thought it was a serious thing for NIO. I think that the administration of Biden, they're not being super like lovey-dovey friendly to China, but they're also not being massively aggressive. And I sort of actually don't think he has it in him to be as aggressive as Trump was. So no, I don't really see that. And I mean, will those 3 China telcos be delisted? Good question. It's going to go through courts. And it's going to drag out a bit. So yeah, I'll be definitely watching that very closely. So guys, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button for the news on that. Also, just please hit the like button. I donate 1 cent to the Gentle Barn Animal Sanctuary for every single like. And we just did our first donation for just 1 week of running this program. And we donated $84 in just 7 days. So that's going to ramp up as our channel is also growing and our audience is growing. So guys, please be generous with your likes and I'll keep donating 1 cent for each one. Let's talk stocks. I just did a video about NIO moving to the US. What do you see it becoming a reality? Let's talk stocks. Okay, but thanks very much for that. I also did a video on that a couple of days ago. At this point, we just know that in Shanghai, they're hiring somebody to basically formulate a US business plan and kind of figure out who the partners will be to install, you know, the electricity stuff and the battery swapping stations, and you need somebody to take delivery, you need a quality guy, and you need to have someone who understands the legal and financial and tax structure and all that stuff. So that's the stage they're at. With Europe, they're actually much further because they've hired a former Tesla operations guy for Europe. He's based in Denmark, and in Oslo, they're really hiring people, anything from sort of people to run the NIO house in Oslo, to people to deliver cars, install battery swap stations, power chargers, all that stuff. Back of house, workshop staff, I mean, really all of it. So in Europe, they're much further. So Europe is definitely happening in 2021. And the US, we have to wait and see a little bit how quickly they do that. Hopefully, Norway will go fantastically well, and that will also encourage them to ramp up the US one. JT, when do you think they'll go to Europe? I think that's going to come pretty soon. I'm guessing here because we haven't got a date there. But if you look at all those LinkedIn job adverts and they're promoted, they're urgent, and they're properly hiring, a lot of them are posted about 5-6 days ago. So I think you might see first shipments perhaps in Q2, latest I would say Q3, and I think that would be a relatively small amount, a little bit what Xpeng's done. They moved 100 cars to Scandinavia, and they've just shipped their second lot, actually, and that goes to show that the market is open to Chinese cars. Of course, Xpeng's much cheaper, but then the Scandinavian market is a fairly high-end one, pretty high, very high-income countries, so you would think that they would also be appreciative of NIOs. And we had Janos here, for example, who's in Denmark, who seems rather enthused about it. So I think there is a market there for that. Oliver there, NIO long and strong, baby. This company is amazing, medium term. Don't be disappointed. Thanks for sharing that. JT, do you think Lucid will be competition for them? I mean, I don't really know. Honestly, I don't know that much detail in terms of Lucid. I sort of follow it very loosely, very lucidly, if I could say that. There will be competition. I think competition is likely to be more your kind of BMW, Mercedes, Audi, that kind of thing. Those kind of high-end brands, because it takes time to build that prestige and brand. And actually, NIO himself, they are saying that he sees his competition actually not as BMW, Mercedes, he sees it as Apple, because he said the philosophy is the same of making sort of perfect technology that combines people and technology and makes life easier. And that's really the sort of the NIO goal there. So that's quite a few years down the road, I think, before we're going to see an Apple car. Lucid, I think is going for a different market. Thanks for sharing that there, just Choice Cars London. What is another one of your favorite stocks? Says Ron Dubels there. Well, Baba for sure. I actually bought more Alibaba yesterday, and I know it was at sort of 266 or something. So, it's gone up quite a bit. The last time I bought was at 222, which was, I think, quite a steal. I wish I would have bought some more back then. But for that, I think, we've got those ratings out going up to $400 and stuff, and they're solving each one of those hurdles the government's put in their way. And actually, for me, I like event-driven items that push stocks down, because I see it as an opportunity. I look at, is the company still there? Are they fundamentally still going to run their business as well? For that, I think so. That's my view on Alibaba. Of course, guys, not financial advice, just my entertainment and my take on something here. So yeah, Baba for me is a huge one that I buy individually. When do you think NIO will turn profitable? Well, Morgan Stanley says 2021. So I'm quite minded that Morgan Stanley guys are pretty smart here. I think their ratings and their analysis seem to be very much spot on compared to some of their European counterparts who are just very cautious on anything Chinese. So I think that's a good one. But you see CCIV after the announcement, says Mister, you know what, I really don't follow CCIV 100%, but I do a bit, but I still haven't really formed a real opinion on that because there's so much speculation in there. I mean, it's just all like hot air. I struggle a little bit with that. I like stocks where I can kind of look at numbers and business plans and where is it going. And with that, there is just a lot of hype in that. And that's not a bad thing. People make money on that, but I do like to buy things and keep them. And I struggle a little bit with on that. So thanks for those comments. I got NIO with 800 shares and Lee Xpeng. Lee is on a pullback at 30. You often follows NIO's price action if NIO is high. Yeah, I think I agree with you there. They are fairly closely correlated. Lee does tend to follow NIO. NIO tends to follow Tesla. I think that's kind of the pecking order there. What do you think about Lee Auto, says Burak. Thanks for that question. I like the company. Their philosophy is different, right? The guy running it is sort of a spendthrift. He's basically known for just cost control. And Lee is going to get profitable very, very quickly, I think. But is it a car that really excites? Is it a business model that can really sort of see exploding? Not really. I think it's more of a steady kind of company and a steady stock. I think they'll be solid. I think they're going to provide good numbers, good margins, lower costs than everybody else. But I don't really see there the branding and that sort of like global takeoff. I think they'll definitely do well in China. There's a place for them, but I'm sort of missing that kind of like sexy excitement you have with a Tesla or an Apple stock or, something like that, which is what I think we might get with NIO, where we are sort of near that. But with Lee, I don't really see it. But that doesn't mean I don't like the stock. I'm just saying I don't see that kind of massive trajectory. I see it sort of following steadily in this kind of path that Tesla, NIO, and the whole EV market has made. Thanks for that question. Felix, how do people in Hong Kong think about NIO? It says me, in Hong Kong, we haven't got NIOs because we drive on the wrong side of the road. We still follow the British system of driving on the left, and therefore we haven't got any NIOs. So it doesn't have a huge amount of brand presence here yet because they're not being sold here. You don't see them on the street. So I don't think the presence, the awareness there is huge. I think in China, mainland China that is, of course Hong Kong is also China, so just across the border, I think the perception is positive. I think it's a little bit seen as a sort of pride issue that there is a very high-end Chinese-made car out of there that's competing with the big German car manufacturers. So I think the story is a positive one there. I'm not saying everybody loves it, but I think from a general consumer perspective, look at all those questionnaires and stuff. What's the number one brand for EVs on all the sort of items you can tick? It's always NIO. And a lot of that's got to do with people seem to really respect the quality and the service they provide. So I think the image there is a positive. Thanks, guys, for your replies. I know about the differences between growth companies and more mature companies, but I simply wasn't sure. There's a similar procedure for Chinese ADR, says Emil there. Did I miss your question, Emil? Do you post it again if I did? And I'll get into that. Have you looked at Proterra ACTC? Only a little bit. I have it on my list of something to dive into a bit more deeply. Thanks for bringing that up. And MarketBeat says percentage of shares shorted 5.36. Okay, that's pretty low. Basically, if it's above 10, it's high. If it's above 20, it's really high. So what we've been seeing these last couple of months obviously been insane. So thanks for checking that. That's Market. You can check it on MarketBeat, and there's also another link. I can't think off the top of my head. Is it fintel.io? I think it might be. NIO US needs to get the certification before they can start selling. They are half the staff ready and running already, says Huang Wilson. Thanks for sharing that. Is options with NIO safe on Q4? Says Oleg. I mean, options are a gamble, right? That's just what it is. You're betting on a stock hitting a certain price point by a certain date. And I imagine you mean call options there. Put options are kind of insanity because you can lose a lot more than you ever thought of. So I mean, I think no option is safe. I think that would be my only comment I can give on that. When did $120 happen? Estimated time, says reactions. I sadly haven't got a crystal ball yet. I'm still working on that. I mean, I think for me at the moment, I'm happy to buy up to $80, and then I think we have to see a little bit more trajectory in terms of month by month numbers, because we only just got to the 7,000 a month, and we need that to grow. So I think it's possible it's going to go triple digit by the end of the year, but we need to see a little bit more clarity on the long-term growth there. Europe in particular, get some deliveries out, get some good Q1, Q2 sales numbers out, and all that kind of thing. So I can't give you an exact date on that. I think you probably weren't expecting one. OJ says there he's expecting EU expansion in Q3 or Q4. Thanks for sharing that. I think it could be a little earlier, but it also depends, of course, a little bit on COVID ravaging Europe. Mr. Beer, do you see NIO working with Apple? No. I think I see them as competitors. And that doesn't mean that an Apple car would hurt NIO, but I think they are more competitors than partners. Because, I mean, while NIO, of course, has a lot of tech and research and stuff, they're not a manufacturer. So Apple is more likely to go to a kind of, Foxconn, who they're obviously already working with, Geely, or, someone like that, who will actually help them build the car. What do you think about Apple working with Hyundai? I mean, I think it's complete speculation at this point. I honestly don't think anybody knows anything, and everyone's just creating lovely clickbait articles, headlines, and I don't blame them for that. It is sort of part of the YouTube game, but no, I don't think anybody really knows anything there. Mats Fanshi Do you think they will include the credit sales in this earnings report? What do you mean by credit sales? Richard Meyer, I'm trying to decide if I should buy more NIO or Barber. Richard, yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? I bought Barber yesterday because I was just I just felt I should have bought more in December. And but yeah, or NIO. I mean, both are for me. Barber, the interesting one is that it's still beaten down somewhat because of event-driven stuff, and I quite like that. Whereas NIO is at a high valuation, Barber is almost more of a value stock. So there are different things to look at. Let me know which way you decide, Richard. It'd be interesting to hear. Joe says buy both. Okay. UG agrees. Richard Meyer, I think you just wrote lol. Joel, what's next news event will drive up the volatility for NIO? Volatility in a good way or in a bad way, I suppose. Look, we are about to enter into Chinese New Year's in China here, so you might see a little bit of a slowing down on the news cycle on NIO. Obviously, February numbers will be important, but that's a little way out. So, I mean, they have managed to surprise us quite a lot this week. So they managed to really provide us with a positive cycle there. And I think we just have to see a little bit this whole madness with shorting and stuff in the US. If that comes down a little bit, I think people will then look again at valuations and more long-term growth stories of companies. Fishstick says NIO is rocketing now. Huang Wilson, battery swapping is the real sell for NIO. To get into national auto marketing and branding for NIO will be battery swapping. I also think in the short term it's a very good branding story. I think in the long term it might well not be required because batteries will get so good you just don't really need to swap them very much. But I think it's a great brand differentiator. It's not that no one's doing it. I mean, BYD has been doing it for ages, but sort of in a premium brand, high-end brand, at national level, no one's doing it. So I think that's quite a good one. Watch bought NIO at $1.80. Well, fantastic. Congratulations. That must make you very happy. What do you think about this ETF, iShares Global Water UCITS? I don't know anything about that. I mean, water has been banded about for sort of the last 20 years as being the next new investment, but I don't know much about the actual stocks in there. But yeah, so apologies for that. Options is a safe option, says Desmond Chan. Yeah, I think it depends on how you play it. I think with everything, you need to look at your particular risk profile and see how you how much money you're putting in, and what percentage, and on sort of what sort of targets and what time frames, etc. What you look most forward about NIO in 2021, says David there. David Leander. Thanks very much for that question. That's an interesting one. You know what I want to see? I want to see solid numbers for Q1. I want to see really solid numbers for Q2. I want to get April, May, June, where we can really see we are definitely going to hit 100,000. And I want to see the first cars being shipped to Oslo, new house opening there, people queuing around the block, being excited, sleeping on the street as if they're buying an iPhone. That's kind of what I want to see. I think that's kind of where we are. They need to deliver, right? I mean, they've given us a lot of new cars coming out, tech coming out, all that stuff, and I'm fairly confident that they can produce those things. But now is the time to ramp up production capacity and actual cars moving out of the door, being sold, and ideally not just in China, but showing us that Europe is a viable option, because that gets us above this sort of cap we have of 650,000 cars being sold a year, because they can't really sell much more than that in China, even though it's a huge market. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm looking for basically really, really, really great April, May, June numbers, and I'm looking for a very good reception there in Oslo. Marlene, what do you think about NIO stock movement being so quiet lately? It almost looks as if some market makers keeping the stock down before Q4 ER. I mean, volumes haven't been huge. Look at the volumes the last 2 weeks or so. Not a lot. I think a lot of people are just kind of like standing a little bit on the sidelines because there's some scary stuff happening in the markets. When the stock market dominates mainstream, I mean, non-financial news, a lot of people are just like, whoa, this is just too volatile, it's too hot. I'm going to sit on the sidelines here. So I think a little bit of that's happening, and just everyone's just distracted by, shorting and GameStop and all that sort of stuff. So I think if that calms down again, that will just help all equities. Why is the market starting to know now? Just bought NIO and boom down, same Baba, says Haja there. That's what I was just saying. It's a lot to do with other things rather than these actual stocks. Valentino, battery swapping is not just about charging, it's about upgrade, safety, and much more. I totally agree with you there on the upgrade. And I think in the long term, that's what it might develop into, that they might need eventually when, batteries have, 2,000 kilometers capacity and stuff, you don't necessarily, and they charge much, much quicker, you might not need it. But having this program where you can basically just drive through your NIO service center and you book it on your app before and you get that latest battery and you upgrade and you pay a little bit more. I think that's a really good business model from a revenue stream. Although some people say, well, will it delay people buying new cars? Well, as long as it gets people into the door of the NIO ecosystem and then makes them loyal subscribers and makes them pay more for the new batteries. And that's kind of the beauty of it. You can obviously just upgrade how much you bill them every month. And similar for other services like full service driving and stuff. I think that's the exciting part. I agree with you. That's a good point. Thank you very much for that. Matt's with credit sales, I mean the environmental credit sales to other car manufacturers regarding zero emissions. Yes, that's an interesting one. So in China, it's being talked about. It isn't really for real yet. We have this kind of carbon trading at the moment just for the utilities, basically for the power companies. It does appear it's going to come. We saw that on the EV conference. We had some of the government ministers talking about that. So I do think it'll come. I think it'll be sort of this next level of subsidy, because there basically are no longer federal, I mean, not federal, but like state level subsidies for EVs in China since 2019, which is why the EV market tanked in 2019. And it's now recovered. The kind of subsidies we're seeing now is that if you live in big cities, so let's say like Shanghai, and you want to buy a car, you don't get a license plate because they don't want more cars. So if you buy an ICE car, you simply don't get a license plate. You basically have to sell your old car and swap the license plate onto your new car. Whereas if you buy an EV, they will issue with a new license plate. So that's why you're seeing that massive adoption in the big cities like Shanghai, Beijing, etc. Again, I did a video on that, guys, and you can see all the top cities. And Shanghai at the moment is the EV capital of China. So yeah, thanks very much on the credits there. I do think that's going to come. I think there will be wider carbon trading for all industries, and the car sector will be one of the sort of next ones. Henrik there, thank you very much. Very kind about how big do you want to build your portfolio, and how long are you holding it? I think there's really no limit. There should never be a limit to how much money you want to make, to how much you want to invest. You reach your target, you increase your target, and that's very, very much my thought process. I do really like to buy companies and just hold them, and hold them basically more or less forever. Now, I might occasionally sell a bit because I want to buy some property or something like that I think is really, really fantastic, or just to diversify, because when you have something in your stock portfolio that goes up like that, at some point it kind of becomes a little bit unbalanced. But yeah, really, I mean, I like to buy things and forget about them. I don't actually forget about them. As you can see, I'm rather active in following stocks, but that's sort of the theory. You buy something and you believe that fundamentally this is going to grow, or it's going to have amazing, free cash flow, or whatever it is, depends on where it is in its sort of growth cycle. And then I just want to keep growing it. There is absolutely no cap, and I think nobody should cap how much money they want to have in their portfolio, and whether that's stocks or real estate or cash or whatever it is. Keep thinking big and keep upping your limits when you hit them. So yeah, that's sort of my quick take on that. Thanks very much for that question there, Enrique. Michael Hardy, have you thought about the next EV challenge with this technology? Is fully integrated homework, shopping, autopilot car integrated to pick up delivery as a service, this kind of thinking? Yes, and we are already seeing that, right? We're seeing in China, we have, Alibaba mentioned on the live call, they actually have fully automated delivery vehicles on university campuses and in some residential areas in China as trials. So they'll deliver food or, deliveries to you. And, we're also seeing that with drones. So I think the whole model of car ownership will somewhat change. I think people will still own more high-end cars. I think your more middle-range car especially is going to be a lot more like dealt with sort of car as a service, if you know what I mean. I think you'll be able to book on an app basically whatever car you want to show up the next day or the same day or same half an hour later or whatever to pick you up and drive you around. I think all of the deliveries will essentially be automated, whether that's by car or by drone. So yeah, I think from that point of view, is your car then becomes a revenue stream for the car manufacturers rather than something that they sell. So they can basically charge you perhaps per distance traveled, per how premium the service is, what times of the days, that kind of thing. So you get into more like a sort of think about how Uber charges, right? When it's prime time, peak time, they charge you more. If it's off peak, it charges you less. So you're going to get into more like a sort of utilization kind of business. And the car companies will make the most money, will be the ones that basically utilize their cars, 23 hours a day, all the time, and are able to attract people who want to be driven around in them or have them deliver stuff. So yeah, I do think this whole car sector is going to change fundamentally, especially in the sort of medium to lower end, because there isn't that much joy in driving. And I shan't name a name here because somebody will get offended, but this sort of medium to lower end car necessarily, if you can just be driven around by the same thing for the same cost or quite possibly less, at least less cash layout. Now, for the really sporty cars, I think people still going to want to drive them because it's just fun. But there are a lot of journeys, and that's what NIO is talking about, that in China people spend on average I think 600 hours a year in their car basically sitting kind of in traffic commuting. And that isn't fun for anybody. I mean, if you sat in like Shenzhen or Shanghai traffic, it's just not fun. It's not pleasurable. And if you can get driven by the car automatically, you can then consume other services in the car, right? That could be streaming, that could be Wi-Fi. I don't know if you can charge people for Wi-Fi anymore, but you could see there could be other things that they could sell in that ecosystem because they have your eyeballs while you're kind of locked in that car. So yeah, I think the whole sector is going to change very much from a selling cars thing to a service revenue subscription scheme. Does the chart look like a cup and handle? Douglas said. I had a quick look at the chart. I didn't think there was anything particularly sort of positive sticking out there. That was at least my view on it. Richard, I just put 200 more into Baba. That's all I can spend right now. Okay, congratulations there, Richard. Of course, always make your own decisions. NIO needs huge investors to be convinced to start huge investments to crank up the price. Yes, I think you do need more in institutional adoption, absolutely. How stressed are you when you're buying stocks, says Ansha there. I think that's a very good question, Ansha. I think really with investing, you need to look at, does this make me feel better or worse? And I think you should really think about that. Is it then something if you want to do if you feel worse about it? And that might also just depend about what percentage of your money or your free cash flow, if you will, you're putting into it. You rely on this bet working out. What if it tanks 50% for 6 months? Can you still sleep? I think those are the kind of questions I think I certainly ask myself when I put money into something. And I sort of, my point of view is with equities, I think in the long run, it's all right. Okay, companies can go out of business, but on average, there are average returns for stocks. So I think just have a think about that. If something makes you really thoroughly uncomfortable, maybe don't do it. That would be my thought on that. Chinese New Year's coming next week, and investors for China are backing up, moving more conservatives for the long holidays. Good point, Huang. Thanks for sharing. What's your opinion about Qualcomm? Buy the dip, George. I don't really have a view on that, to be honest with you, George. It's an interesting one, but thanks for that. I might look into Qualcomm a bit more. Della, hello Felix, do you still look at eHang? I do, yes. They just announced some more, like an ambulance kind of trial program in Europe, which is interesting. Look, I love the tech. I think the quality of their drones, I think is very good. The valuation, though, is a challenge. They're selling 20 odd drones a quarter, and they are $300,000 a piece, which is fine. But just look at the valuation. We kind of need to see that there is a lot of delivery growth priced in there. I do think they are the leaders in China for sure. But yeah, that's a little bit my challenge with that. I wrote that down in December. I wrote down in my notebook, look at EHang buy question mark. And I didn't get around to looking at it because I was just preoccupied with Baba. And so I kind of missed my opportunity there a little bit there, I think. Thanks for reminding me, Del. Thomas, with NIO establishing themselves as an overall brand, which has a feel of more and cars batteries, do you see them balancing out into other products other than vehicles? Well, I always thought this whole lifestyle stuff they're putting out, the hotels and the fashion, all that stuff, would actually be loss making. But if you look at the lovely Scottish pension fund investors who've been in NIO since before the IPO, they actually put a value on that of 200 billion renminbi, so that's about 30 billion US dollars. So they actually think that that will long term be a positive income stream. I don't really have a strong view on that, but it's interesting that they think so. I mean, they've been with NIO for quite a long time. Do you think CCIV merger is likely, says Ali? It's such a hyped story, Ali. I don't know. I don't really have a view on that one way or the other. I think it's just speculation. What are your thoughts on Gov't? Does that constitute a threat to the future of NIO? Don't really know much about what is Gov't. Let me know. Hopefully NIO partners up with the Chinese government to produce rockets like Tesla. That would be cool. Yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen. I think they are going to get, government orders, and they're going to get more integrated in providing services and full service driving, possibly to other Chinese state-owned companies. They're kind of, full service driving as a sort of service kind of stuff. I think things like that, yes, possibly. I don't know about rockets, but it would be nice, wouldn't it? If NIO went to the moon, wouldn't that be nice? Valentine, do you have an understanding of the strategy agreement with the Macalline and Sunning? I only know that Macalline, they were building charging stations. Do you have any info about that? I think really these, they sort of call them joint ventures, but they're fairly straightforward agreements. So someone like Macalline has 60 massive furniture malls. So there's sort of like a I don't know, IKEA, but much bigger. And obviously they have huge car parks. People go there every single day to buy stuff. Furniture and sort of DIY sales in China are going through the roof. It's a massive trend. So basically they and NIO together build power chargers there. It's quite sort of as simple as that. And it could be that the furniture company kind of gives them the space for free and designates it for free. Maybe they put a little bit of money and then NIO builds the power charger. But it's just sort of mutually beneficial for everybody. It's a premium brand and everyone's happy basically. But I mean, it's good for the brand, but it isn't sort of like it's not a rocket to the moon, if you know what I'm saying. It's just more power chargers that are NIO branded. Robert, I'm not a fan of charging stations. Too little intellectual property and low barriers to entry. Yeah, I also don't think, particularly in China, most charging stations are built by the government. There is a standard plug. So I think the way I see it, it's basically a branding rollout. If you're driving around and you just see these service stations, they're not hugely expensive to build and they're branded by NIO. It just makes you think about the NIO brand. It just creates more brand awareness. But I think in the long term, it'll be a little bit like petrol stations. I reckon someone else is going to run these. Are Chinese into genomics? Can't really answer that, to be honest with you. I'm not really much into the genomic space because of the animal testing on monkeys. To me, that's sort of a step backwards rather than a step forward. I did a video on that the other day. I don't know how many there were. Tens of thousands of monkeys in the US. Quite a lot of them actually come from China. They get brought in or they get bred in the US and then they get subjected to the stuff so people can eat fried food. So yeah, not really my topic there because of that particular ethical issue for me. Do you have any fund or stock that is extra animal friendly? Okay, that's a nice way to round off from that question. JVC20. One of our members here, he was talking about that, and it's quite a challenge to look at that. I actually saw on Interactive Brokers that brokerage, and I'm not plugging it, but I'm just saying they have a thing on there now. You can select ethical things you like and dislike, and you can select for example, you know, no animal testing and stuff like that, and then it rates your stocks according to that. So that's kind of interesting. That's becoming more of a thing, but it is still quite hard to look at those numbers. I mean, I think Tesla has done a good job. They've stopped selling leather. I hated that when they first brought Teslas out. I'm saying you're putting leather seats into a carbon neutral future vehicle. I don't know if you're doing, but they stopped doing that. And, you know, we saw that with NIO, with the ET7, the standard premium option are all sort of natural fibers. So I think there is a trend towards that, and I'm glad to see that. But it is still a bit of a challenge to find those funds. I agree with you. It's a bit of a challenge. Felix, ever heard of Alusa Energy Corporation? No, sorry, I haven't. I bought 2,000 shares of NIO 2 years ago at $3. Well, curly-haired twin sisters there. You must be a very happy person. Sean, how much have you put into NIO? I might do a video on that one day, Sean. I might do a bit of a reveal. I was also thinking we might do a bit of a YouTube portfolio when YouTube starts paying me. We might do a bit of that, and that'd be a fun way to sort of see what's happening with these. What are your thoughts about Baidu? I mean, it's a very good company, I think, fundamentally. And again, as always, guys, it's not financial advice, just my thoughts. There's essentially the sort of Google of China in many ways. Of course, they dominate the search space here. They also have, you know, the Baidu self-driving technology, and they have their fingers in lots of stuff and lots of AI and cloud and data and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a very, very solid company. Not cheap, not expensive, I would say. I mean, it might be interesting to do a proper deep dive video on that one. I do fundamentally quite like it. Hello, Felix Alvarado. Hello, welcome. If you're asking a white tea guy for advice, you shouldn't be buying shares, just Shannon there. Well, you shouldn't be asking for advice because I'm certainly not allowed to give it. So I just share commentary and entertainment, and we can share and exchange some information in our lovely Q&A live chats. And I learned from it, and that's, I think that's about it. And it's enjoyable. So guys, I think that's about a wrap, really. I think just from the week, we've had a lot of positive news. We have the industrial park being announced. Chinese government is putting the profits from the bailouts of NIO back into NIO, essentially. NIO now owns more than 90% of the business. They're buying out the government shares there. We have this sort of US launch somewhere in the offing. I mean, they're working on a business plan. Europe launch much closer. They hired the Tesla operations guy for Europe. He was with Tesla for 4.5 years, a bit more than that. He was based in Denmark. They're actively hiring in Norway, opening NIO houses there, battery swapping, power charging, deliveries, finance people, sales people, the whole lot. Morgan Stanley predicts NIO will be profitable in 2021. I think that's all very exciting. Yes, we had some criticism on cash burn. We had some criticism on the bailout. Some people don't like the Chinese government being involved here. I think I've answered those. I've done videos on those, so do check those out if you like, guys. Please hit that like button. I'll donate 1 cent for every like. And we've just done that earlier today. If you check out in our community, I put a post on there. We donated our first $84. That's for just 7 days, our first 7 days of running this program. And we're going to run it for all of February. So we're going to collect a nice chunk of money there for the animal sanctuaries, guys. Make sure you're subscribed. We do lots of lives, do lots of Q&A. So hit that subscribe button, guys. Appreciate everyone who's tuned in here. I love all your comments. I love all your likes. Really enjoying our community. We smashed 7,500 subscribers today, which is very exciting. So guys, appreciate everyone sharing our videos, tweeting it, putting it on Reddit, wherever you are communicating with your community. Whether you like our videos or not, put it out there, and I love you for it. Thanks very much for tuning in, guys.